Jungle has a reputation of being this complex, mysterious role that seems to require a PhD in League of Legends to even attempt. And to be fair, there is a lot to juggle as a jungler. While your laners are focused on their little slice of the map, you're trying to keep track of objectives, help struggling lanes, secure vision, counter the enemy jungler, and somehow find time to actually farm your camps. Well, that's what junglers want you to believe, at least. We may upset the jungle mains, but we genuinely think it's both the easiest role to learn, while also being the strongest role of all 5 at the same time. Jungle is much easier to pick up than you think, and in this guide, we're gonna make it so easy, you'll be confident loading into a game even if it's your first time on the role. We'll cover everything from some beginner-friendly champions, how the primary jungle system known as pets work, how to properly kill the jungle camps, beginner opening routes, everything to make your ganks more successful, and then we'll teach you some simple rules that you can follow so you always know where to go and be at all times, and finally, the best ways to secure most objectives. And once you've mastered the basics, then SkillCapped will be the best place to learn even more. Jungle is without a doubt the role that is most affected by what elo you're playing in. So listening to challenger players who have never played a game in gold tell you how to climb is definitely not going to give you the best results. At SkillCapped, we take pride in the fact that we get all the latest strategies from challenger players, but distill the information down so that it's actually useful in your own games. We're so confident in our teaching method that we offer all our courses risk-free. If you don't rank up 5 divisions while actively using our service, you get your money back, no questions asked. If you're interested in signing up, click the link below after the video. First things first, you can't load into a game of League without picking a champion. So here's our recommended picks if you're unsure about what to play. We always encourage you to play anything that you find enjoyable. You will improve faster if you're actually having fun and want to improve at your champion. But if you have no idea where to start, here's some good recommendations. For some brawlery champions, you can't go wrong with either Volibear or Xin Zhao. Volibear in particular is probably the best jungler we could recommend for beginners. In lower levels of play, he's just a monster who can run over everyone because no one understands how his kit works. Basically, your W marks someone for a while. If you W them again with the mark, you deal a ton of damage and heal yourself based on your missing HP. Since no one plays around this mechanic, it's almost impossible to lose fights as Volibear. He's the perfect beginner champion. Not only that, but he ganks and does objectives very well too. You never even have to recall since you heal so much from your W, even on objectives. And the best part of it all is that his ultimate disables enemy towers. So unlike other junglers, you have way more options for where to score kills on the map. Volibear is genuinely extremely easy and very effective at what he does. If you're more into being a dedicated tank, then a Mumu is the #1 recommendation. The reason is because he actually does a ton of damage unlike other tanks. So he's very self-sufficient and you can make plays on your own without relying on another ally for damage. And for an assassin pick, we'll always recommend Nocturne. His ultimate is very straightforward, letting you dash to anyone even from far away. And then you just press all your abilities and outduel most champions. He's very easy to assassinate enemy champions on. Now that you've got your champion, let's talk about loading into the game. First things first, make sure you take the Smite Summoner spell. The client automatically forces it on you if you queue jungle, but always make sure you've got it on, otherwise you can't buy one of these store pets, which you need to clear the jungle. And these little buddies are the reason why we believe jungle is so easy these days. They are technically extremely complicated. Don't even bother trying to read everything they do because it's a lot. To put it simply, they just make killing the jungle easy. There's a slight difference between the 3 we'll cover soon, but here's what they all share in common. First, they deal damage to camps alongside you automatically. The best part about it is that they deal area of effect damage. So for the most part, you can just focus fire the big monster in every camp and your pet will usually clean up the little ones for you. The pet makes it so easy to kill monster camps that you could theoretically play around 90% of the champions in this game as a jungler fairly decently. Doesn't mean they're good picks, but that's just how easy jungling is these days. Not only that, but they restore health along the way as you kill the camps. And one of the most underrated parts of the pets is that they effectively give you infinite mana, so you never have to think about it. Almost everywhere that isn't a lane or one of the 2 bases counts as the jungle. And when you're standing there, you get extremely high mana regeneration when you're running low. It's almost impossible to run out of mana, making resource management a non-issue. Pets really are your best friend as a beginner, and they trivialize killing the jungle monsters. All you do for most of them is focus fire the big one, while your pets help you out with damage, while also restoring your health and mana constantly. Which brings us to our next mechanic around pets. You're expected to pay them back for how useful they are by feeding them treats. You'll notice at the start of the game that you start with 40 stacks on the item. Your goal is to get this to 0, and you do so by killing jungle camps. You don't even have to think about it. The pets will feed themselves when you kill the camp. Before we continue, players hearing this information almost always think that they should prioritize this as quickly as possible by just sitting in their jungle farming camps. However, you don't need to rush this. Riot added a catch-up system to account for this. Basically, you passively generate treats throughout the game. If you kill a jungle camp, your pet will eat the treat, generating more stacks. So even if you haven't killed a jungle camp in a while, you can quickly catch up due to the treat system. Like everything else in the jungle, Riot has made things as simple and streamlined as possible, so you never have to overthink anything. Once you get to 20 stacks, your smite will go from dealing 600 damage to 900 against jungle monsters. Not only this, but it will now be usable on enemy champions for a little bit of damage and a slow. It's not a crazy upgrade, but it can help you secure a kill every now and then. At 0 stacks, your pet will fully evolve. Now your smite will deal 1200 damage to monsters. And here is where it finally matters which of the 3 pets you bought. A fully evolved pet will give you a small buff, and you become a decent bit stronger at this point in the game. Green provides a shield, blue will provide movement speed whenever you enter a brush and kill camps, and red will deal a bit of damage and slow whenever you hit an enemy champion. Which one you buy is honestly just preference. The buffs are decent enough, but not worth stressing over which one you pick. We will say that the red one is definitely the weakest out of the 3. It's only bought in niche situations, so we'd advise that you default to either the green or blue one. Now, like we mentioned, the pets do make clearing the jungle camps easy. All you have to do is focus the main monster in every camp, and you'll generally do fine. But there's a few tips that will help you clear the jungle a little smoother. First, the only exception you need to worry about is the raptor camp. That's because the small raptors actually do a lot of damage. This will only matter the first time you kill them at around level 2 or 3 though. At this point, you may want to focus the little ones down first and finish the big one last. This will depend on your champion though. Some characters are really good at killing the little raptors right from the get-go, so just experiment a bit on what you're playing. Like we said, that's only at the very start of the game. Afterwards, killing the raptors will be easy like every other camp, regardless of what you're playing. And the only other thing you want to learn when it comes to killing camps is kiting them. In between your autos and spells, you want to move around the camp's leash range, which is outlined. As long as you don't go out of it, you'll be fine. By kiting the camps, you can mitigate how much damage you're taking since the monster isn't auto-attacking you as it chases, letting you preserve some health. We'll discuss what jungle routes you want to do soon, but kiting can also be used to go from one camp to another. So for example, if you're killing the raptors, you may want to kite them down as you move to the next camp. This lets you save health while fighting them, but also gets you to your next destination faster. Depending on how new you are to League, rest assured that kiting isn't mandatory. You can 100% just sit there and tank the camps, and you will still clear the jungle easily. This is just a skill you may want to work towards. Alright, now that you know how to clear the jungle, let's talk about the order in which you're going to kill the camps. There's 2 simple details that will make this easy to understand. First, you want to think of the jungle in 2 quadrants. There's the blue quadrant and the red quadrant. Each one holds 3 camps, and they're named this way because of the important buffs in the area. The blue sentinel, when killed, will give you a buff that provides a ton of mana or energy regeneration and some cooldown reduction. The red brambleback, on the other hand, gives your auto attacks a slow and a bit of damage. These buffs are relatively powerful, and you want to make sure you pick them up along your opening routes. Okay, for your opening route, there's 2 settings you want to check first. Go to interface and find neutral camps and enable it. The setting just shows icons over all the jungle camps you'll be killing. Afterwards, in your settings, go into game and enable recommended jungle path. Riot pulls data from the millions of games being played and shows you the route that you should follow on your specific champion. So if you just follow this trail, you will generally do fine. And that's because the recommended path being shown to you is simply the most standard jungle route you can learn, the full clear. All you're doing is starting at one of the major buffs in one quadrant. Then you're killing the other camps there. Then you transition through mid to the other quadrant and kill all the camps there. After killing all 6 camps, you will be level 4 with both powerful buffs. As simple as that route is, it is probably the most effective thing you can do in 95% of your games. Even the most experienced junglers use it nearly all the time. And after completing the full clear, you want to venture out into the river. The scuttle crab here spawns at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which generally lines up with when most junglers finish their initial clear. From here, you've got a choice to make. If you don't see anyone around, you can take the crab for yourself. However, the enemy jungler is sometimes doing the exact same thing you are. Depending on what direction they went, the enemy jungler may end up on the opposite side as you do, or they may end up pathing the exact same way you did. So in around half your games, you will run into them as the scuttle crab is spawning. Then you have a choice to make. You shouldn't feel too bad about giving up the river crab if you don't think you can win the fight. The scuttle crab is not really that important to secure, or you can fight them over it if you feel like you're stronger. Rest assured, the champions we recommended are all fairly decent duelists in the early game, so you can usually win the 1v1 over the scuttle crab with these picks. Another detail to pay attention to is the enemy jungler's health and level when they arrive to the fight. If they're lower health than you and didn't hit level 4, you're basically guaranteed to win that encounter. So to wrap things up, your most common route is simply clearing all 6 camps and then trying to secure the scuttle crab on the side of the river that you end up at. A slight variation of this route is one that includes a transition gank through mid during your full clear. Same as before, you will clear one quadrant of your jungle, but if you notice that you can potentially make a play in mid lane, instead of entering your other quadrant, you can simply go to mid, make a play, and then this neatly transitions you to the other quadrant of your jungle anyway. From there, you can continue your full clear. The one downside to this route is that it's 15 to 20 seconds slower than a typical full clear. So for example, if you were to transition gank through mid, while the enemy jungler just kept clearing, they will probably arrive at the scuttle crab before you do. It's a slight downside, but one to consider. There's one other route to mention, but this is one you actually don't really want to do. We're only discussing it because it's such a popular route that you may hear about it and question whether you should try it. The fast level 3 route route is one where you do a combination of the blue sentinel, gromp, and the red brambleback. As the name of the route implies, this gives you a fast level 3 while also securing both of the powerful buffs. The goal of this route is to try and gank one of the lanes on the map as quickly as possible. On certain aggressive junglers, this can have pretty solid results, but this route has so many flaws that we can't even discuss them all in this video. But the biggest issue is that the gameplay at a beginner level is too random. It's way too difficult to plan for something. In many games, you will hit level 3 and then look around where you can help, but your teammates may randomly be dead in top. Or maybe you try to go to another lane, the enemy player begins playing extremely safe, so you can't do anything there either. So you're just stuck aimlessly roaming around, wondering what you should do. This is why we don't recommend it. It's too random and not at all beginner friendly. As a beginner, you will do more than fine by just sticking to the full clear or the transition gank routes. But after a while, if you want to learn when and how to adapt, then check out our pathing courses. We cover every detail to jungle routes as simply as possible. As you've seen, your opening route is extremely basic, and you don't really have to think about it too much. The real issue you may face is deciding where to go early on. With both routes discussed, you may have noticed that you start on one side of the map and end up on the other. So if you start in the blue quadrant, you'll end up on the bottom side of the map. This is the actual decision you will need to make. Which quadrant you start your opening route on mostly depends on which of your 3 lanes you want to influence first. As a new player, that's going to feel like an almost impossible decision. When you don't even know what any champions do, how are you supposed to make this choice? And even if you do know every champion, there's so many different unique matchups in the game that it's impossible for an average player to know how each one is supposed to go. Don't worry, there is a very simple guideline you can follow to make the best decision almost all the time. All you need to do is learn whether characters are melee or ranged. Just this information alone can allow you to make consistent decisions, and that's because of how lane dynamics work. Laners want to last hit minions to earn gold. So if 2 melee champions are in the same lane, they will often engage one another because they need to get up close and personal to last hit minions. As a general rule, it is almost always a good idea to path towards a double melee lane. So in this example, we started on the blue quadrant and ended up in the top side. That's because both champions up here were melee, so there was a lot of fighting going on immediately. As a result, a kill is picked up easily. And we can see the same thing in mid. Both champions were melee, so there is predictably a lot of fighting going on. Again, this made it simple to swoop in and finish off an easy kill. On the other hand, if there are 2 ranged champions in one lane, it is usually a good idea to not head there early on. Ranged champions can kill minions from farther away, so it's far less likely that they fight each other and get low on health. But what about when a lane is mixed? One side is a melee champion and the other side has a ranged champion. What then? For the first few levels, ranged champions are overwhelmingly stronger than melees. Since they can attack them while they last hit, the melee player tends to play safe, while the ranged one pushes up aggressively. So if your teammate is a melee character versus a ranged one, it's almost always a good idea to look towards that lane. Ranged players are usually squishy, and if they are pushing up aggressively, then it's going to be very easy to secure kills in that lane. What about bot lane? There's 4 people down there. What do you do then? It's actually just as simple as the other lanes. Bot lane is typically a combination of a carry and a support. The carry is almost always ranged, so don't think about them at all. Only look at the support matchup. And from there, you can follow the same rules as before. So if there's 2 melee supports in lane, it's usually a good idea to go down there, since it's very likely there will be a lot of action, just like you would in mid or top. Now that you've decided where to go, let's talk about some tips for securing kills more consistently. The almost surefire way of guaranteeing your team scores a kill during one of your ganks is by approaching from the flank. If your opponents have to run through you to get back to the safety of their tower, it will cause them to take more overall damage. So if you're ever in a position where you're behind an enemy laner and they're fairly extended in the lane, it's almost guaranteed that you will score a kill. But you obviously won't always be able to loop around them to approach from behind. That's okay. If you're approaching from the river, just make sure you don't run straight at them. You want to achieve a similar effect as before by cutting their path off instead. This way they still have to go through you to get to their tower, making the play more likely to work. If you've managed to cut someone off, then this next tip will almost always secure the kill. Most jungling champions have some sort of movement speed buff, dash, stun, or any mobility spell in general. If you've already cut the enemy player off, do not use these spells. Just approach them and auto attack while using some of your other abilities. Enemy laners will run the flash summoner spell like 99% of the time. So when you flank, your goal is to try to force them to use their flash to get past you. But by saving your powerful abilities, you will still have follow-up to catch up to them and secure the kill. Speaking of flash, it's such a powerful defensive ability that there's another important way that you can play around it as a jungler. Go into settings, interface, and then enable show timestamps. With this enabled, you can see when something happened in the game. After you force someone to use their flash, make sure you bring up the scoreboard and click it. This will time it in the chat for you. Flash's cooldown is usually 5 minutes, so you'll know exactly how long you have to gank that player again while they're significantly more vulnerable. It's genuinely a decent strategy to re-gank lanes over and over again. A player with no flash is much easier to kill, and even if they're worth a bit less gold, a kill is always a kill. Letting your teammate push the tower and keep keeping an enemy out of the game is not bad, so don't feel like you're doing something wrong if you're only helping one lane out. Sometimes that's all you can do. We hope that you can see that jungling really isn't that hard. For the most part, what we've covered is fairly easy to immediately implement from your first game playing. But now we're going to talk about the most important concept that every jungler needs to understand. Here's where things can get a bit tricky, but we're going to give you some easy to follow guidelines so you always feel like you know what to do. As a jungler, you need to be extremely time efficient with your decision making. The jungle role is really strong because you're not locked down to a lane and you get all your gold from monster camps. You're free to impact the map however you like. But that's exactly what makes players fall apart. When you have so much freedom to do whatever you want, you can easily make bad choices that put you behind, unable to catch up. Here is the simple solution. All you have to do is base every single decision around your camp respawns, and you want to make plays around the camps available to you. This is comparable to laners, where they spend most of the game farming minions and make most of their decisions based on their wave state. As a jungler, you want to prioritize making plays on the side of the map where you have camps available. As a simple example, let's say you have your wolves and gromp camps available, but your raptors and krugs are down. If you go gank bot lane and you don't get a kill, you now have nothing to do. With no camps to farm in the area, you'd have to walk all the way back to your wolves, which is a massive time sink. Instead, let's imagine you went top. Maybe the play doesn't work this time either, but at the very least, you can walk back into your jungle and immediately start farming some more. It really is that simple. Following this guideline won't always give you the #1 best play available, but you can rest assured that you will never make a terrible decision following it. If you mostly make plays around which camps are available, you will always have a steady stream of gold and experience to keep you strong in the game. Another key efficiency tip you really need to apply is trying to keep your camp timers in sync. Let's just imagine for a moment that there's a situation where you're doing your gromp, but your wolves are spawning in a minute. By the way, that's what these little hourglass markers mean. The gray ones mean the camp here will spawn in a minute or less, and the yellow one means it will spawn in under 10 seconds. If you want more accurate camp respawns, many jungle players use the Blitz overlay app to get actual timers over the camps. Back to our example, your gromp camp was up, but wolves weren't. So you farmed one monster and then had to go do something else. After your wolves have spawned, you return to the area after a while and farm those. A little later on, you come back and find your gromp is up by itself again. This is the problem you want to avoid at all costs. As a jungler, you need to run around all over the place, impacting the whole map. The key to being efficient is always having multiple camps up in each quadrant of the jungle. The 4 basic camps respawn every 2 minutes and 15 seconds, whereas the blue and red buff camps spawn every 5 minutes. Whenever you enter a quadrant of your jungle, you ideally want to see 2 of the basic camps up every time. And of course, it's even better if one of the buffs is up as well. This way, you're able to clear 2 to 3 camps in a small area very quickly, which gives you a huge chunk of gold and experience, and now you don't have to come back to this quadrant for another 2 minutes or so, which keeps you active on the rest of the map. It's a really simple guideline to follow when you think about it. When you enter a quadrant of the jungle, you just make sure to kill everything in it before leaving. That's it. We urge you to follow these guidelines as you're starting out as much as possible. Like we said, they're not always the best choice you can make in every situation. It'd be impossible to teach that in one beginner video. The point of our guidelines is to make sure you're always doing something decent, no matter what. But if you do want to learn how to adapt your decisions based on what you see, then our jungle courses are perfect to get you to that next level after you feel confident you've got the basics down. One final note on being efficient is that there's a certain pattern that you ideally want to see when jungling that will tell you that you're doing things right. You should often find that if you do a full clear of your jungle, that your clear pattern should repeat on the next cycle. So for example, Hecarim started on his bottom quadrant this game. After some early action, he recalls and the camps begin respawning. He goes to Krugs and you can see that the camps are coming back one by one in the order in which he killed them initially. If you find this happening to you, you should be proud that you're doing something right. It means that you're not wasting time and you're farming your camps efficiently. And the final thing you need to know to begin playing jungle well is learning to play around objectives properly. Except, not really. This is where a lot of players overthink the role and believe that they need to be a perfect map strategist and secure everything for the team on their own. This just isn't the case. Almost every objective you go for later into the game is a team-wide play. Putting the sole responsibility on yourself isn't realistic and not what you should do at all. Your only responsibility on objectives is using your smite's big burst of damage to secure the final hit. A quick tip in regards to that is to combine your highest damage ability and smite at the same time, so you burst it as much as possible at the last second. Most champions can burst for around 1400 to 1600 damage if they combine their primary damage spell with a fully upgraded smite, so that's what you should try to do every time. The only time where you actually need to think about securing objectives on your own is early on into the game when most players are still in their lanes. Your goal is to try to secure as many of the void grubs and dragons as possible. Don't just start them randomly though. You need some sort of advantage to get them consistently. There's 2 common timings to look for. First, if the enemy jungler is on the other side of the map. Your counterpart is obviously trying to gank lanes and get objectives too, and they also can't be everywhere at once. It takes about 30 seconds or so to do the void grubs or dragon, so the enemy jungler being on the opposite side of the map typically gives you just enough enough time to do them with no risk. The other timing you're looking for is pushing lanes adjacent to the objective you're looking to do. If there's a wave at their tower, the enemy laner is unable to move from their lane, so it's unlikely that they can contest you. On the other hand, if your teammate has a wave at the enemy tower, they don't need to be in lane anymore and effectively have free time. They can use this free time to potentially help you secure the objective, so you can ping them at this time and they may help. If they don't, at the very least, the enemy laners can't harass you. And that's it. Don't put any more pressure on yourself other than that when it comes to objectives, at least as you start out. Try to get some early ones, otherwise you're contesting them with your teammates together later on. As a final note, you may have questions regarding entering the enemy jungle to steal their camps, not just taking your own. This is known as invading, for those of you who aren't aware. There's some hidden game mechanics around invading that makes it more difficult to do, and that's why for beginners, we actually don't recommend you do so early on. It's okay to just focus on your own jungle, at least at the start of the game. Invading is also a pretty skill-expressive tactic. You need to know where the enemy jungler is, whether their camps are up in the first place, where their teammates are, where yours are, do you have a getaway route in case things go wrong, and so on. This requires quite a bit of game knowledge, which we do cover in our jungle courses. So if you actually want to incorporate invading into your gameplay, then you need to check those out because we go way more in depth about it there. But for now, it's genuinely okay to do it when you're ahead. If you think you're very strong and you can duel others, then go ahead and try to invade. If you can just kill everyone, then you can do whatever you want. That's somehow always the simplest answer in League. In any case, that's all you need to begin playing jungle effectively. Good luck in your new role.